Welcome, fans. We are live on the Hannibal TV on YouTube with our second edition of the Hannibal TV Fan Forum. This time, because you voted on it, we are looking at the life and career and any of the aspects of the career of the eighth wonder of the world, Andre the Giant, the late, great Hall of Famer, actually the first inductee to the WWE Hall of Fame. And I am, of course, Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, here with the Godfather, the founder, the man of the hour, Hannibal TV Zone, Hannibal. Hannibal, how are you today, sir?
And not just me, but our good friend from Iran with the nice lion thing there. Hello, nice to see you. By the way, just speaking of the lion, for some reason I keep getting these Facebook shorts of like lions devouring their prey or like very brutal animal attacks, and it's like I don't want to see this when I log on to Facebook, because a lot of the time it could just put you in a depressing mood. Like, I don't know what's going on with that or if I'm the only one, but I hope it stops. I tell it to stop, but the lion just reminded me of that. We are here to talk about Andre the Giant, who could probably feed a whole pride of lions if they were to jump on him. Okay, there, the ragu. He's not the only one. I saw a disturbing one the other day. I'll just say this, because this is really disturbing. I don't mean to get off the topic. There's pigs. There's a whole bunch of people watching, and there's pigs being forced alive into this pool of alligators, and there's somebody like shooting them with a fire hose as they're trying to run away. And it's like, could you think of a more brutal way to kill a pig? And who are the people it's not like some type of like public thing to watch. Like, let's bring the family and watch the pigs get eaten alive with alligators. Anyways, please do something about that, Facebook, because that could put you in a foul mood. But Andre the Giant, he could eat a lot. Mm-hmm. Let me spin that to Andre the Giant. Mm-hmm. He could eat a lot. I don't think I've ever heard of any wrestler that could eat more, but you've been studying him. I'm sure we'll get into the food stories. We'll answer the fan questions. But Jack, what do you want to start with?
Well, he unfortunately passed away at a young age. He was 46 when he passed away on January 27th, 1993. He was actually over in France to attend to his father who had died and was going to be there for the funeral when he apparently passed away in his sleep. He, of course, started his career in Europe and France back in the 60s and was quite active from an early age. I believe he started wrestling about 16, and he always was remarkable for his huge size and became a real attraction in North America, starting off in Montreal with Edouard Carpentier, who brought him over to with this story that he was in France and traveling along a road, and this huge tree fell over, and Andre lumbered out of the woods and removed it, and basically brought him over to wrestle. But he had actually competed some shots for the AWA at the time in some of the territories where he was considered one of the interesting juxtapositions of the the young Andre with the older Andre was he was quite an athletic youngster before he put on, the amount of weight that he did, and he was known for his drop kicks and other athletic maneuvers, and it was something that developed over time, which we'll talk about later when he signs with New York and becomes less of an territorial performer and attraction. But he was, according to the wrestling historians, the most famous wrestler in the world at one time, a top international box office draw, and certainly the highest paid performer in the 70s, no doubt. And we all, of course, those of us of a certain vintage, remember Andre the Giant in the WWF and the epic encounter with Hulk Hogan in WrestleMania 3. So before we get a little deeper into the history, Hannibal, what are your recollections of that build to WrestleMania 3, which saw a gate of around I believe it says $1,599,000 in '87 and a pay-per-view buy rate record of about 10.2% of available households, and the largest closed circuit gate in history at that time too.
Well, the most interesting thing about WrestleMania 3 that I've heard about lately is, unlike now where they want everybody to fly into the WrestleManias and they announce them like a year or more in advance, oftentimes more than a year in advance. The one in Detroit with Andre and Hogan, they only announced like 6 weeks in advance, and that some people will say 71,000, whatever. Someone will say 93, but apparently that was mostly local people driving. This was not people flying from Ireland. First of all, WWE wasn't as international back then, but just to show you, like on a per capita basis, they were able to pack that place. It was before I became a wrestling fan. I was just a kid then, very small kid. I became a fan just before the Mega Powers exploded, WrestleMania 5. So I don't remember much as a kid other than that is still my favorite WrestleMania. I would always rent it. I eventually bought it. By far, up to this day, 3 and 5, I think, are my favorites. 6 was up there too. 7 wasn't bad. 7 was underrated, but definitely 3, 5, and 6 are my 3 favorites. Just because of it was the only one in a stadium for the longest time. Well, there was WrestleMania 8 too in the stadium, now that come to think of it, but then there was nothing else in a stadium other than 8 and the Wembley Stadium until God knows when. Because even in the Attitude Eras, they weren't running stadiums. So I even remember as a kid hoping that they would, or no, they did Toronto in a stadium too. I guess I've had too many concussions, but it seemed like the stadium shows were rare back then. So it stood out to me back in the video renting days. They were in a stadium and then they had those golf carts with the ring ropes on them. That was unique, which Hulk Hogan did not use for that match. And then we could get into all of Hulk Hogan's lies for that match, but I don't know if there's a point at this point. I mean, he's good at telling a story, and where nobody works angles anymore, and everyone just says they were all friends, it's fake. Hogan will still tell you that he was drinking all day because he didn't know if Andre was going to win, or if Andre was going to let him win, or if Andre was going to shoot on him. He'll say that he was worried about Andre shooting on him. Then in the same stories, they'll try and tell you his back was so bad that he hadn't wrestled forever, when he was wrestling right up till that, and then jobbed for Ultimate Warrior a lot and was tag team champions after that. But if his back was really that bad, why would you be afraid if he could shoot on you or not? And I just don't think that would have ever been a concern of him at all.
No, but what is most interesting about the build to the match, and me being older than you, I remember it distinctly as part of my fandom, was the WWF. Despite the fact that Hogan and Andre had many matches in the past, Dothan, Alabama, in the territories, and then of course the famous Shea Stadium match where Bruno against Zbyszko was the headline when Hogan was a heel. They reinvented history that they had never wrestled before, and Andre had never been slammed, et cetera, which of course was not true. Andre actually was slammed many times in the past, from Harley Race to Fujinami in Japan to Killer Khan, on and on, Kamala. But they eclipsed that, and they also went on to say that he was undefeated, Andre, which wasn't true. Harley Race pinned him in some 2 out of 3 falls encounters, but Lawler beat him by countout. So and others. So he was not undefeated, but they took away all of that. And this was the days before the internet, so the average fan is looking at this like he's undefeated, he's never been slammed. And they also said that he was always the smiling, friendly giant that we saw on WWF television. And really, he had quite a career in Japan where he was a heel. So I think they did a really masterful job rewriting history for that, and thus building interest.
Yeah, and they were also saying that they'd never wrestled before at various points too, which they mentioned in the Vince documentary. When they had wrestled, here's how it's different, because with YouTube you could just look it up. But even though in WWE, like not that long before, there was actually a Shea Stadium show with Bruno Sammartino against Larry Sabisco, which was the main draw. Hogan will tell you it was him and Andre, which apparently wasn't as big back then, but it was still a big match on the card in the same company. And just the way that news traveled back then, they could say only a few years later that they never wrestled before, and everyone just buys it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that build to WrestleMania 3, you've got to give a lot of credit to the late great Bobby the Brain Heenan, who was such a great heel manager. I remember distinctly the Piper's Pit where Andre came out and then Heenan was introduced as his manager. And interesting story, I'm sure the super fans read this, but at the end where Andre rips the cross off Hogan's neck, he actually cut into his chest, and Piper uttered that iconic line, "You're bleeding," and put a real touch of realism into that match. But interestingly enough, Andre had undergone surgery in his back in 1986 and was actually not as in such a tenuous physical condition as he would later be, but it was still a case where allegedly he wore a back brace and spent a lot of time at the ropes. But this I want to get your opinion on this, Hannibal. This goes to show that story and emotion. I mean, the work rate in that match obviously wasn't Ring of Honor, peak Ring of Honor style spectaculars, but still one of, if not the most famous and well-regarded matches to this day because of the emotion and not the in-ring product.
Well, that's part of wrestling, and I will say this. People that say wrestling means you're a good wrestler if you can, whatever they call a good match now, is leg slapping and how many flips you can do or how many times you've practiced it. Wrestling is actually the Olympic form of wrestling. Part of what's used in the UFC. These guys that can fake wrestle well. I never heard of Chris Benoit ever winning one tournament in anything, one championship in anything. There's lots of guys that can pretend to. I mean, there are some like Billy Robinson that actually could, but there's also some that can do the fake chain wrestling, and they actually aren't tough at all and don't know how to wrestle. Pro wrestling is about entertainment. It's about drawing the fans and making money. So obviously, I failed at that, but I am a good reporter. I'll give myself that. But Hulk Hogan, as he said, the best wrestler makes the most money. So you got to say The Rock is the best wrestler of all time. And I would put Hulk Hogan second if it goes by who made the most money. But yeah, as far as that incident, I only remember seeing it after it happened, but it was very emotional, and you just don't see emotion like that. And we were talking about it in our wrestling news the other day. Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, we talk about the weekly news. Just how now there'll be like seemingly endless confrontations for like 10 to 20 minutes in the ring where the enemies will stand in front of each other and just blah, 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 talk back and forth, which I hate. It actually turns me way off of wrestling. All that whole angle needed how long was that segment? 2 or 3 minutes?
I think a total of 5 minutes tops.
Exactly, and there was no other. I can't remember if there was a battle royal thing. I can't remember if it was before WrestleMania 3 or 4 where Andre like headbutted Hogan on Saturday night's main event a bunch of times. At one point, I think was it before 4 or before 3?
I think it was before. I think it was before 4 because they didn't actually touch until in the most recent incarnation at that time till WrestleMania 3.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. That's all you needed, and that's what's great about it, because now it's like overkill. And if you hate each other, why would, like, after you did something like that? Imagine if the next week an in-ring segment, as they say now. Everybody watch. We're gonna have an in-ring segment with Andre and Hogan, and it would have just been them talking around in the ring. I liked it better in those days. Then you would just have like the short promos during the event center that didn't last very long. But I don't know. That's the era I'm from, where you had emotional stuff like that, and they were all great workers, and I'm sure that wasn't scripted. I'm sure they all talked about a bit about what was going to happen, but it was just all those larger than life characters in that. Andre's larger than life, Hogan's larger than life, Piper's larger than life. Bobby Heenan was an amazing character. It's like you just don't see that anymore, to me.
No, and speaking of, I think you're absolutely right with the Vince's credo there that if you don't turn heads in the airport, then you're not going to be a star. I think there's a lot to that, and that and wrestlers such as our friend Kevin Owens wrestling in a t-shirt and biker shorts or whatever he does, that certainly takes away from it. But I think we should talk about just for a second the promotion of Andre the Giant as 7'5" or 4 and 500 plus pounds. According to Dave Meltzer, he was closer to about 6'10", but at the end of his life, he probably was about 500 pounds due to the extreme weight gain. And those historians also will recall that Andre suffered from that pituitary gland condition, which increased growth hormone in his body. So he never stopped growing, but as a consequence, his lifespan was much less than the average person. Even then, they were saying he wouldn't live to see 50, and that was certainly the truth. But apparently, when the surgery came around that the Big Show Paul White got, Andre had the choice of to get that or not, and he felt that I guess that this was who he was, and it would kind of kill his gimmick and his aura, so he decided against it. But as with most major acts in wrestling, height and weight is exaggerated, so to speak.
Yeah, it is, and I don't know if it really matters that much because he was still huge. But the one thing about his life, and I even heard Piper say this, with him pretty much constantly drinking, it seemed like he never stopped drinking. He drank in the morning, he drank on the plane. He's one of the few guys they let drink always, even in the more modern WWF drink backstage. If he hadn't drank constantly, like, didn't he die of a heart attack? You just read that. Like, alcohol is bad for your heart, and if you're a continuous, nonstop alcoholic, I'm sure that added to his weight gain and added to the strain on his heart. I'm positive of that.
Well, significantly. I mean, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But Bruce Pritchard on his podcast, where they did a deep dive into Andre, said that Andre drank a ton, and even Harley Race couldn't keep up with him. For every beer Harley put down, which he could put down a ton, Andre would have 2. But he said that Andre would not get messed up, so to speak, until after he wrestled in the ring, but then there are others that say that he was, drinking constantly. And I think there's a lot of substantiation to some of those stories that he at one sitting consumed 146 beers and 18 or 19 bottles of wine. But yes, the consensus is if he was never a workout guy, never set foot in the gym, but had that deceptive strength. But if he would have looked after himself better, he probably could have extended his life.
Probably, and there is the infamous story from Mexico, I guess, where he allegedly had horrible diarrhea and crapped on Bad News Allen, someone I used to know. Like that. Sadly, when I knew Bad News Allen, it was before YouTube, and a lot of these stories weren't out there. And I wish I could have asked him about that or the infamous altercation. But I've heard, and I mean, wrestlers exaggerate everything. But the story was that Andre sat on him. And as happens sometimes when you drink too much alcohol, you have horrible liquid diarrhea. Horrible. And imagine with the amount that he drank, plus Mexico, which with the quality of the food there isn't that great. But apparently, every time he moved, just more and more would come out. So it was like a comedy of errors. Like the harder he tried to get off, the more he crapped on Bad News.
Yeah. I actually did see an interview with him shortly before he passed, where the interviewer said, "Is it true during a match in Mexico, the Giant lost control of his bowel functions on you?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said it was clearly an accident, but and he just wiped it off. And I guess they went to the finish. But there's also another interesting story that Bad News talked about involving Andre, where one time they were on I guess it was a European tour. They were tired. Andre was drinking, and he repeatedly used the N-word in reference to not necessarily to Bad News himself, but he just let it go. And Bad News was quite upset and basically told him, "Let's go outside now." And anybody that knows anything about Bad News Allen knows he was a quite an accomplished judo guy. And who knows if that time in Andre's life he would have won that one. But apparently the next day, Bad News went up to him and Andre apologized profusely for that. But yes, the Mexico story with the enchilada explosion is legitimate according to him.
Yeah, and we all know, we were talking earlier about Hogan's exaggerations. Hogan was asked, and I forget which podcast this was, but I watch all of the Hulk Hogan podcasts because whether he exaggerates or not, they're always entered. It's more, I'd rather watch that than either of the wrestling programs because he just tells such funny stories. But he was asked about that Andre incident from Japan because he was claiming that, Andre could beat up anybody. He was the toughest, just adding to that aura of Andre. And he asked about the Bad News thing, and not only did Hogan deny it, but he said he was there the day that it actually happened, and he made up some story about Bad News used to carry a man purse. And he says, all I remember from that day is they had some type of conversation, and Bad News had a man purse. So it's just like, where does Hogan come up with this stuff? Because I never remember Bad News ever carrying a man purse.
No, did they even have those back then?
I don't even know.
Hogan, his most outlandish claim, I think, was that he was in line to be the bass player for Metallica. So yeah, a lot of the mythology around that Hogan has put out there around that WrestleMania 3 match, that he had no idea if he was going to do the job, blah blah blah, if he was going to let him slam him. That's kind of been intertwined with the official version of the match itself. But
I like that he still sells it And also from WrestleMania 3, whether people want to admit it or not, Honky and Jake still sell their feud. You can say whatever you want. They still sell that feud. And Jake and Ricky Steamboat will still sell up to this day. So Jake is a great worker. That, oh, you can't fake a DDT on the concrete. Ricky Steamboat was actually concussed. Blah, 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 blah. We've seen a million DDTs on concrete since then. Yeah, you can fake them. Is it dangerous? Yes, but I just like how he still sells it.
Yeah, that's I mean, I was going to talk about the main event special thereafter, but we might as well segue into some of the individuals that Andre supposedly had heat with, and apparently, if Andre either loved you or did not like you, and one of those individuals was, in addition to Uncle Elmer, for reasons unknown, was Jake Roberts, and Jake portrayed Andre as a bit of a bully. Are you familiar with the story that I think he brought it up in the interview with you, that Andre stepped on Jake's hair in the ring?
Yes, and although, I mean, I like Jake overall. Some people might wonder it, but I actually like Jake. I wouldn't believe everything he says about everything, but I do believe that they probably eventually made up, and he said that Andre guzzled him in their first match. I do believe that, and wrestlers like to exaggerate, but for the amount that they wrestled and feuded, I don't think that there would have been that much heat for the amount of time that they feuded, because if you look at people that he really didn't like, was apparently Savage, because of the way Savage treated Elizabeth. They didn't have all that many matches if you look it up. Him and Snake did, and Iron Sheik apparently, as a fan brought up earlier, Phil, he really didn't like the Iron Sheik, probably because the Iron Sheik was also messed up all the time, but not necessarily didn't necessarily handle it as well as Andre, and maybe he just came off as an asshole, which
What
a lot of
about
people say.
the
But
most famous latter day heat that he had with the Ultimate Warrior, where Heenan, I believe, in a shoot interview, told the story about how Andre felt disrespected by Warrior, and when they had those horrendous series of matches, one of which I saw at Maple Leaf Gardens back in the day, not this particular one, but I guess Warrior was going too fast and not selling anything for Andre. And at one point, he went full speed into Andre, and Andre stuck out his fist and made him see stars. Do you have knowledge of that relationship?
I've heard Bobby's story. I know Bobby really didn't like the Ultimate Warrior, as a lot of people didn't. Could Andre have given him a receipt for being stiff at some point? Yes, but I've heard the Ultimate Warrior talk about those rumors as well. And Warrior had this point. Who did he put over more in WWE than the Ultimate Warrior? They went around the loop, and he really did have a really bad back that day, because soon after that feud, because it wasn't too long after that, they put him in the tag team with Haku, and it wasn't too long after that before he was finished. But like, if he hated the Warrior that much, he wrestled him on all these house shows night after night, and he put Warrior over in all of them. So yeah, I've been pissed off at people in the ring too, and stiffed them back as a receipt. It doesn't really mean I hate them or anything, but I could see Bobby Heenan again. He is a worker. He's a manipulator. If he had a bad experience with Andre, I could see him like spreading the, or with the Warrior. I could see him trying to spread that narrative, just like a lot of people don't like Jake the Snake. Or maybe Andre didn't treat them well, but to take the heat away from it, they're going to say, oh, well, Andre really hated Jake the Snake. He did this. But like, in those days, usually you probably even know from being in wrestling this long, the people that you feud with, it's not usually that they're enemies in real life. Like, the people that you wrestle the most and have the best feuds with, you're usually pretty good friends with, because that means that you make money and are comfortable working with each other. So I would guess that Andre and the Warrior where I doubt they went out and had drinks together. Andre probably liked the money he was making with the Warrior. And the Warrior is pretty blunt, and he was dead. Andre was dead by the time Warrior did this interview where he was asked about Andre. If they had heat, Warrior could have just buried him, like he did Hogan. I mean, I'm positive the Hogan. We won't get into the Warrior today, but I'm positive that the Hogan hug before Warrior died, they're working for WWE that day. WWE is a work, guys. It's not real. If they want you to do something on camera and are paying you, I mean, if you can watch that whole thing where Warrior shoots on Hogan, he was telling the truth. A lot of that stuff came true, but we won't go down that road. But Warrior only put up. I didn't hear Warrior say anything bad about Andre, and Andre was dead.
No, good point. And perhaps the Ultimate Warrior can be one of the topics the fans can vote on at a later date. But I think it's also important to talk about the rematch with Hogan in '88 on the main event from Indianapolis, where the rating it was the first live wrestling in the U.S. in like 30 years. And according to Meltzer, 33 million saw that match, which was the most viewed match in U.S. pro wrestling history. And that's, of course, where, if you can remember that sort of schmoz finish where Andre executed some kind of a underhook suplex, pinned Hogan, and then sold the title to the $1 Million Man. And that was also the evil twin referee gimmick. So can you imagine so many people watching live wrestling on network? I know Saturday night's main event is coming back. You talked about it in the news update with Jesse Ventura in some capacity, but can you imagine people watching live wrestling on a network now in 2024? That many?
Yeah, and that doesn't include like it playing in other places and people taping it and stuff back then, because I doubt they had the ability like now they can trace who DVRs it and stuff. But think of it, Dynamite's been getting like 500,000 viewers. I don't think they ever touched 1 million once. It's usually these days around 500,000. The WWE Raw and SmackDowns, they'd be very lucky if they hit 2 million. They're usually quite a bit below 2 million. I'm too lazy to look up what they did this week, but 1.2 million seems familiar for one of the shows. But could you imagine everyone saying that, oh, there's a boom in wrestling now? This is a hot period. Cody's trying to say, oh, this is the Renaissance era. 33 million people watched that match. That's crazy. Everybody was paying it. People were talking about it everywhere, and it was a rematch. And it aired at like 11:30 at night because it was replacing Saturday Night Live. And I hear them saying last week, oh, Thanksgiving, that's the reason why everyone got such terrible ratings. That used to be one of the hottest nights for wrestling in the year. It's still a great day for football. So stop making excuses. If at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday night, 33 million people watch, it's because they wanted to watch. If you want to watch something, Billy Graham even said it. They had a turn away crowd at MSG once. Thousands were turned away in a snowstorm. If there is a product that people want to see, it doesn't matter. If it's a mediocre product, yes, some of the other factors will make a difference. Is it a nice day? Is traffic bad? What time is it going to air? But if it's something you really want to see, people will find a way to see it like that.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point, that there were actual draws in mainstream or the big companies at the time, such as Andre the Giant, and they actually went mainstream. And Cody Rhodes, I have my own opinions of his suitability as a world champion, but what you can't argue is Andre the Giant had a level of mainstream recognition that Cody Rhodes certainly doesn't have. And we're talking about his 2 appearances on the $6 Million Man as Bigfoot. He also had that famous role in The Princess Bride, did a quite a popular honeycomb commercial, on and on and on. He was, and he was also, I believe, on Johnny Carson. So Andre was a legitimate star and transcended.
And David Letterman as well. David Letterman a bunch of times. Right. I don't know. He could have been on both, but I've seen David Letterman once.
Yeah. So that's something that, is somewhat, when we talk about wrestling being in a renaissance or whatnot, I think you've pointed this out numerous times. Even during the Attitude Era, the product is not mainstream. I mean, and you've talked about this too, aside from maybe John Cena that have transitioned over into acting, not a lot of wrestlers, even with the WWE, are well known. I'm sure Cody Rhodes wouldn't be mobbed walking down an average street, but Andre the Giant certainly had a very successful acting career when he took that time off following the event we just talked about after WrestleMania 3.
Yeah, even though Andre's been dead for like 31, 32 years now, literally almost 32 years next month. He died in January 93. If you asked 100 people in either Napanee, Ontario, where you are, or Wichita, Kansas, where I am, who is Cody Rhodes, who is Andre, I think more people would know Cody Rhodes here because wrestling now is a little bit more popular in the US and Canada. People in Canada don't really seem. I mean, there's hardly any shows in Canada. That's a good example. There's no future AEW shows. There's one Canadian upcoming show in Canada in March. So I think if you asked 100 people in Canada, Cody Rhodes to Andre, the vast majority would know who Andre is, even though he's been dead for 32 years. Maybe 15 might know, and that's just honest. I would think maybe 15 people will have heard of Cody Rhodes. Random people. It might be higher here. But they actually did a study not too long ago, and in a university, I forget which one, but it was done this year. They went around asking people to name 5 wrestlers. And it was Macho Man, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Steve Austin. It's like nobody even like as big as Roman Reigns is in wrestling, and he is great, and he's making supposedly, I think Conan said it or something, maybe 15 million a year, which is possible if Lesnar's making 12 to sit at home. Like there's no doubt he's like by the way, Roman Reigns is to me is over more than Rhodes. He has the coolness factor more than Rhodes. I don't think your average quote unquote cool person would think Cody Rhodes is cool because he's such an uptight corporate person. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying he's very corporate. If you don't like a corporate person, you're not going to like Cody Rhodes. But
and a mid-carder.
Yeah, well, I don't find him entertaining. And again, we were talking about the long, boring promos. It seems when I watch it with him, it's like I can't sit through any of this. All he's going to do is stand in the ring and talk. Anyways, I'm not into that, but I'm just saying that for everyone, this isn't so popular. People recognize more of the old school names for whatever reason.
Wanted to also mention, of course, the tag team that Andre formed with the great Haku, a Great North Wrestling talent, been in the ring with him many times. Hannibal, you know what a legend he is, but because of their connection with the Heenan family, apparently Howard Finkel came up with the name, and it for a time masked Andre's inability to move. Haku would do the work. Andre would stand in the corner, do the headbutt, et cetera, and they had quite a program with Demolition, and his last major title was the tag team championship with Haku. What do you remember about that team? And specifically, they had a pretty interesting program against Demolition. Also, Great North Wrestling talents.
Yeah, did they win it or lose it at WrestleMania 6? I think Demolition won at WrestleMania 6, right? They went back there.
They dropped the belts unless the CTE's getting to me. Yeah, but that's it.
Yeah, I remember they had a title change there. I mean, that was a good, what were they? The Colossal Connection?
Colossal Connection, yeah.
Yeah, they were, I mean, there's two real characters, two people you would never want to fight and just like represented 80s and early 90s wrestling very well. Like they would pass the test, which I mean, I hate to hate on Owens and Zayn, but to me, if you saw those two walking down the street, no one would look. No one would bat an eye. What was cool about wrestling and what made me fall in love with wrestling was the larger than life characters. And Andre and Haku, you see them walking down the street, you're crossing to the other side. You're not just gonna go 3 feet away. You're just gonna cross right to the other side because they're so scary looking. And yes, it was great because Haku made up for Andre's lack of mobility. Then you have Bobby Heenan managing them. I mean, they're great. I have nothing bad to say about them. And I will say, Demolition is underrated. Yes, looking back on it now, it seems kind of cheesy, but in those days, you have to remember to watch the Road Warriors before the Road Warriors came to the NWA or to WWE. A lot of us, unless we've rented the tapes, NWA didn't air that openly in places like Canada. Because I remember I had seen them on tapes, but to me, Demolition was way more over than the Road Warriors because they were on TV every week. They were big looking. They had the makeup and stuff. So I remember that colossal connection. And what a fall for Demolition. And we will talk about Demolition sometime, but they go from beating Andre and Haku at WrestleMania 6 in front of 68,000 people to jobbing to Tenryu, and I think Bobby Heenan called him hand towel at WrestleMania 7. Two Japanese guys that no one ever heard of. I guess it had to do with some sort of WWE deal, but I know they became famous in Japan, or they were. But to me as a kid, I just remember like, what? Who are these guys, and why is Demolition losing to these guys?
That was Crush. That was Crush when Edie was out against Tenryu and Fujinami for. It's when WWF had that brief relationship with SWS, and they were trying to break into the Japanese market there. But I agree with you. Demolition were massively over. Excellent tag team. I had the benefit of seeing the Road Warriors during my time in the South, and were massive fan of them. So when Demolition started, I thought, kind of ripping them off here. But then some of my friends who are the Road Warriors, like, because they weren't familiar with them. So the Road Warriors, when they came in, were seen as kind of Demolition ripoffs. But I think at the end of the day, Demolition were an excellent tag team, and they, especially the version of Edie and Darso, and it's a crime that they're not in the Hall of Fame right now. Crush, I did meet in Barrie, Ontario back in the day, early 90s, and he was an absolutely nice guy. I was a fan of his work, but I think Demolition, Axe and Smash definitely should be in that Hall of Fame.
And I don't want to stray off topic, but for Mort Goldberg talent, thank you for being a member, helping support the channel. I just want to say I agree with you on this, that he's being shoved down our throats. But one thing I want to point out that Cody Rhodes said at a recent press conference, it could have been just after Survivor Series. He said, "Consider me the quarterback of WWE. Nick Khan and Triple H tell me what to do. I run the plays." Could you imagine like Piper saying, "I just do what I'm told to do"? He's pretty much admitting that it's scripted. It's like, I'm told what to do and then I run the plays. It's just like, could you have any more of a corporate answer than that? That's what turns me off about him. Not everyone might get that, but to me, it's like, you are just the most corporate person of all time. And I like the Outlaws. So there we go. Here, Killer Khan broke Andre's leg. Was that shoot? Is that talked about at all?
It was his. It was either his leg or his ankle, and it was an actual injury in a cage match, I believe. Big Killer Khan fan myself, and it was used to. They incorporated that into an angle for sure. After the run though with Haku, Andre apparently had a falling out with Vince McMahon and made a famous appearance for the UWF, Herb Abrams UWF, which should be a topic for the fans to vote on at a later episode, and then famously showed up for the anniversary of wrestling on TBS for WCW in I think it was, I'm going to get the date wrong, I've forgotten, but that was through his relationship with Dusty Rhodes. They apparently were friends, and he also got along well with Bill Watts. So there was a falling out there with Vince Jr. that apparently was never fully rectified. Then he came back. He had knee surgery, was going to work a program with Earthquake, and then came out on Kane's and one of the SummerSlam events. Earthquake and Typhoon attacked him, and he went off. He was supporting the LOD, made the save to set up their feud. And aside from a few appearances with the Bushwhackers, that was the end of his time in WWF. Are you familiar with the rationale for the falling out with Vince Jr.?
I figured it must happen. Phil is saying here, and I will believe him since he's a member. The members here are pretty much smarks, like I am too. I'm sure he knows his stuff. And now that you mention it, Phil, I did remember hearing that the con thing was an angle because he broke it. As we all hurt our ankles in bad ways. I wish I could say I did mine in a more noble thing, but it's always the silly stuff that does it. But the falling out, no, I remember as a WCW fan seeing the Andre appearance, but I'll be honest, I didn't really care at the time because it just seemed like he was done with wrestling by that time. Even as a kid, it just seemed like, okay, Andre's appearing. I didn't really think much of it. The main thing I remember of his last appearance was the Bushwhackers thing where he came down to the ring. I think that also involved the natural disasters. I'm glad he did it, but I remember even as a kid thinking about, oh my God, he looks in so much pain. And they did promos together and stuff, so at least he got a few paydays out of that. I know he wrestled Scorpio, my friend, in Mexico towards the end too, which is interesting that you wouldn't think Too Cold Scorpio wrestled Andre, but he did, and he was still wrestling in Japan fairly close to the end too, I believe.
Yeah, well, excuse me, we'll talk about his last match ever, which was in Japan, but a fan on social media wanted me to bring up and get your, since you've recently watched the glorious big event from Exhibition Stadium in Toronto in '86 that I was at. He wanted your impression of Andre when he was one of the Machines against the great tag team of one of my favorite heels as a youngster, King Kong Bundy and John Studd. And they had some great six-mans with Bobby Heenan, with Hulk Machine in a couple of them, but Blackjack Mulligan and Bill Eadie under a mask. But what do you think of Andre adopting that? Because the storyline was that he was suspended and he was pulling the Midnight Rider by coming back under a hood or Yellow Dog or whatever. What are your thoughts of that era of Andre?
Well, again, that was before I was too young to really see it at the time because I started watching in '89. I do remember though, because at the video stores would have the wrestling wall and you could get the tapes of the Machines. And I remember because there was no internet back then, my main memory of the Machines is what the hell is going on, because you would just see the tape with Andre and Bill Eadie dressed as the Machines, but you didn't really have the backstory. So I don't really remember other than I guess it was a pretty cool concept that maybe they should do again with some wrestlers, because I can't remember anything like that being used anytime in recent memory other than the Mr. America Hulk Hogan thing, which was Hogan's last real appearances in WWE until he made up with them recently. Oh, and by the way, we haven't really mentioned the alleged feud between John Studd, and maybe this is why Andre was jealous of Uncle Elmer, as you mentioned. He didn't like other big wrestlers, and supposedly,
Yeah.
even though he wrestled Stud a lot, that might be a case. And I don't know if it's exaggerated or not, but maybe two people didn't necessarily get along, but they wrestled just for the money. And of course, Andre probably liked beating John Studd, and John Studd probably liked getting the money from WWE, and you couldn't refuse a match back then. It's not
Apparently,
AEW today, like where Miro can just be like, I don't want a job. I'm going to go back to Bulgaria. Just keep paying me. You'd lose your pay back then.
yeah, apparently John Studd wanted to be a giant, and Andre felt that that was gimmick infringement, so to speak, and he didn't like John Studd because at one time he was calling himself, the giant John Studd, and taking all the growth hormone, etc., to become bigger and larger than he was. So the heat was there, but you jog my memory about one of the most interesting moments of WWF Andre in that golden era was our mutual friend Ken Patera and John Studd when they cut Andre's hair. That was before your time too, but you must have seen that in the tapes. And Ken Patera will tell you, although he wouldn't sell for John Studd, he seemed to like Ken, who's a very likable guy, but he would sell for him.
Yeah, but Ken was like 6'3", 6'4". By the way, he'll be doing another interview with me soon. He broke his computer somehow. God only knows how. I've done it myself too many times to talk about. But I told him he didn't have to explain it to me. I know the feeling. But as far as the heat, I think that John Studd is just tall, similar height to Andre, and that was where the heat was. He did also, Ivan, you're right. I interviewed Kamala. Kamala accused him of being racist. And I think Kamala even carried a gun to one of their matches, a small gun, after being roughed up by Andre another time. And then Andre never messed with him again. But I mean, I'm not sticking up for any of these guys. But the N word, it seems from everyone I talked to, I don't know when this stopped, but it was still going on at various points in the 80s. I'm pretty sure it stopped being used in the 90s, but there were a lot of stars. Some of them you'd be surprised by, since we've heard like by numerous accounts, Ric Flair would throw it around. I mean, he idolized Dusty and Murdoch, and too many people have said Murdoch was in the KKK to not believe it. But I'm just saying, like in those days, it was more common for the N word to be thrown around. Did Andre hate black people? Who knows? Was he friends with any black people on record? I really don't know. But he has had those accusations. But I can say, and I'm not saying this is right, it's just like I don't even know if you can say this on YouTube, but calling gay people the F word, I'll just say. You could say that and not necessarily even mean to be insulting up until like maybe the early 90s. And that was just a word to describe gay people. It didn't necessarily mean that you didn't like them. But now that would be like, you'd be canceled for saying that unless you're too old for it to matter. But it just seems like times have changed. I'm not saying he was or wasn't racist, or that was or wasn't right. I definitely don't think it was right. But people, it seems like from everyone I've talked to, it was much more common for people to throw around words like that in those days. And I definitely don't agree with it. But I'm just saying how sincere was his racism. Clearly, there was some from that Bad News Allen incident and what Kamal is saying, but Kamal also said the same thing about Dusty.
Ivan is bringing up a very famous issue that Andre had, or a very famous story when the Freebirds were new to the WWF and they had that cup of coffee there and they showed up late to the building and they were messed up because they were partying, and Andre threw them out and fired them. And I guess Michael Hayes said, "You can't fire us," or whatever. And Andre emphasized that in fact, he could fire them, and they were gone. If
Yeah, I just want to say that some people's like question whether I've heard a story from the guy that wrote Bad Street USA with Michael Hayes saying that WWE actually wanted to bring Michael Hayes in with a super push as a singer. And I've heard for a long time that WWE always wanted like a singing character, which they, I guess, got a version of that eventually with Cena as a rapper that got over. But they wanted to actually put out a Freebird album and stuff. And people can deny that all they want, but look at their debut in Philadelphia. It's a packed house. They come in with Cyndi Lauper and Dave Wolf in a limo. The camera follows them from the limo, Goldberg style, like 10 years before Goldberg, plus going through the dressing room, coming out the curtain. They would have got a massive push, but they screwed it up, as many of us wrestlers have, through making bad decisions. But to say if they liked Michael Hayes or not, he's still employed. He got it with a company like 7 years after that, and he's one of the longest tenured employees. So they obviously always liked Michael Hayes to begin with. So I don't think it's not that unbelievable that they were going to get the push to the moon, but they pissed off Andre, and Andre put his foot down on it.
Yeah, I'm a big Freebird fan, and that would have been something I would question, given how hard they were partying, how long they would last. Ultimately, it wouldn't seem to be a very long time, but yeah, much more protracted than 2 weeks. Hannibal, you brought up Andre's last matches, and they occurred in Japan, 92, October 21st. At Budokan Hall. He teamed with Jumbo Tsuruta and Terry Gordy to beat Dory Funk, Baba, and Hansen. And then his absolute final in-ring match ever was December 4th, same building that year, teaming with Baba and Kimura against some Japanese individuals that I'm probably going to mess up the pronunciation. But his last match ever was December 4th, 92, in Japan.
Yeah, there you go. And he died in 93. So all I remember was it was mainstream news in Canada when he died. My parents told me, and I remember reading that he got 10 bell salutes. And I remember I had the magazine that they put, the WWE magazine that they put out when he died. But again, I wouldn't say I was a big Andre the Giant fan. He was part of the whole era that was my favorite era of wrestling. But I can't say like I was an Ultimate Warrior fan. I was a Macho Man fan. I was entertained by Hulk Hogan. I like Hulk Hogan. I would say I'm a fan of his actually, but I was more of a fan of Warrior and Macho Man when I was a kid and Undertaker. But I was never like, I didn't have Andre the Giant posters on my wall or anything. And I'll be honest, I've tried many times to watch The Princess Bride. Even when I was a kid, I hated it. And I don't get why it was such a popular movie. I tried, and I've watched a lot of crap movies over the years. For whatever reason, it did well, but I can't say I was an Andre fan. But now it's easier, and I think he might have more fans than ever because of the internet, because the Andre stories have become so huge. It's just like Brody, which I'm sure we'll talk about on one of these, that he is better known now. And I've even heard his wife Barbara say it than ever because of the internet, because all these stories are out and you can watch the Andre matches and stuff. But I can't remember. I mean, Hogan and Andre, you'd have to say whatever you want to describe or however you want to define work rate, they sold out that building. Honky Tonk Man, I agree with them on that. There were some other key matches on that card, but that was the draw. They were on the tape. That match sold it out. So that's the main Andre match I remember. I couldn't really tell you much about Andre matches because by the time I became a real fan, his work rate had gone down and he just wasn't like as monstrous as he was. I liked more of like the high intensity guys. like the Road Warriors, like the Ultimate Warrior, or the very charismatic ones like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan. Andre, to me, while he's larger than life, he was a lug, a slow lug, scary and stuff. Great heel, but I can't tell you. Which, by the way, I'll shout out Tank Abbott's wife, Sally. Andre's her favorite wrestler. Andre is her favorite wrestler. So there are some people that love him, but I'm more of a fan of the stories than I was of his matches.
Yeah, I couldn't really understand why. If you think back to that WrestleMania 3 era, he seemed to always have the same suit jacket on and shirt underneath with the stains on it. And the suit jacket, I still remember it. It looks like it was, the curtains of the Knights Inn off I-95 in Dayton. So I thought perhaps he was wardrobe impaired at the time, but I don't think you can argue with the fact that he was central to. I mean, aside from the money that he generated pre WWF signing the exclusive contract in the territories, the battle royals, the just the attraction. He was all over the place, and he would put asses in seats. And when he signed exclusively, aside from the Japan tours with the WWF, he was integral to that WrestleMania 3, which is, again, the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Huge business, huge ratings. And I agree with you. He was never my favorite in-ring performer, but he certainly was a phenomenon and a real, genuine attraction.
And before the internet, when you're only reading about them in magazines and stuff, and even like VHS, you'd have to rent them and stuff. YouTube didn't exist. I mean, I would definitely have paid to see him, whether I liked the matches or not, because it'd be like, holy shit, Andre the Giant's coming.
Mm-hmm,
like I would have. He was a huge draw. I'm not taking away. He was a great draw, great character. But I was never like, oh, Andre's on. I got to see this, unless it was Saturday Night's Main Event '88. But I was too young for that. By the time I started watching it as a kid, he was already downgraded to his feud with Jake Roberts. But the other thing, one thing I would have loved, because I love French cooking and I love food, I wish I could have gone to his restaurant in Montreal. And I wonder, I would like to know this. If anyone knows this, put it in the comments, please. Because, of course, he started in Montreal as Jean Ferret, and that was one of his most popular cities. And he liked Montreal so much because it's a lot like France, the closest to France you can get in North America, other than maybe Quebec City. But he had a French restaurant so he could dine the kind of cooking that he liked at this restaurant, and apparently it was great, and a lot of the wrestlers would go to it when it was in town, and he would hang out there. He wasn't the type, though, apparently. He's not the type greeting people, being friendly to fans. He apparently wouldn't even be friendly to fans a lot of the times if they were eating in his restaurant. But I wonder if it was still in existence when he passed, or when it actually went out of business, or if it ever made money and he just kept it, because he didn't even name it. Wasn't named after Andre or anything, and I don't know if it was a public knowledge in Montreal that he even had this restaurant. He may have just created this because he was making tons of money, as you mentioned, one of the highest paid wrestlers of his time, and he knew he was going to die, so he didn't care about just having a restaurant with a legit French chef that would just cook him the food that he liked. But I would have loved to have tried that, because I love French cooking. So if any, I'd like to know, could it have lived on? Did someone else take it over? Is it still around under a different name, or did it go out of business before he died?
Well, that's definitely interesting. Not to mention his love of fine French wine, but in any event, a definite Hall of Famer and a man who is going to be remembered forever, as long as there is a sport. Hannibal, we're over the 1 hour mark, but I wanted to ask you about the future episodes of this program and some of the possibilities that the fans will be able to weigh in on, because we're seeing great interactivity with this concept, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just going to read this with the fans because it's up there before I answer that. Apparently, when he actually retired, he was going to spend more time there. But I'm doing this for myself. It did open in '74. I guess here's a picture of what it looked like. So it wasn't that big a place.
Looks like a Subway.
Yeah. He did talk about it in 1984 on Letterman too. I remember that. But it doesn't say when it went out of business. But interesting.
I'm sure the fans, when they see this, will put that information in the comments.
But yeah, for the future, we'll do another vote on what fans. Oh, I don't know if I'm still. Yeah, I'm still sharing the screen. There's Andre outside of it. That's pretty cool. Nice. See, I'm getting hungry now. But
for some escargot.
Yeah, for some escargot. See, I like escargot so much, I'll eat them right out of the can.
That's awesome.
But yeah, let's see what the result was. If any of the fans are online still watching this, you tell us who you want to see next week. You had mentioned King Kong Bundy might be a good topic.
Oh yeah, that individual has a fascinating story too, and what a great run he had for sure. But there's so many. Brody is another tremendous option. Whatever the fans dictate, we'll go with.
And I actually had some dealings with. Hey, we had 344 votes for this week.
Ivan suggesting JYD. That's another great one.
Junkyard Dog. Well, he's one of the more popular topics on the Hannibal TV. Quite a character, and apparently he also sold himself to the groupies, according to Tony Atlas. So this is what it was this week. Andre won. He got 41%. Hogan movies. I love Hulk Hogan movies, but it only got 12. The second place was best old school themes. We'll put that one up there again.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
We'll put Bundy up. We'll put JYD up. Big John Studd. We'll put that up. Todd, Leo, Jonathan, Vincent. That would be a unique one for sure. But Jack, I'll let you wrap this up. Thank you for the interaction. Again, we're doing this because the fans have been wanting it. They like these fan discussions. I like reminiscing about the times when I used to actually love wrestling. I still love it, but I can't watch most of it these days. I mean, Raw is coming here to Wichita Monday. I'm debating whether I'll go just to review. Dynamite is only 2 hours away. I was thinking of going to both Raw and Dynamite this week, but I don't know if I want to torture myself. It might lead to something bad happening. But Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, we're going to do a news podcast. And Saturdays, 5 Eastern, 4 Central, we will be doing the fan discussion one.
Yeah, I want to echo that and put over every Wednesday. The news podcast is the Hannibal TV this week, where we go down whatever news rabbit hole that there is. But for the fan forum podcast, we try to stick to the topic that you, the fans, ask us to discuss, and it's a real blast. Plus, it's I enjoy anytime we can talk about wrestling history and preserve that, and maybe educate some of the fans so that they go and check it out. But until next time, I'm Jack Kilby for Hannibal. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Hannibal TV, hit the notification button, and give this video a thumbs up. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.